Welcome to the Igniting Imagination podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Greenwood. In our last episode, we began a conversation with my co-host for this season, Gil Rendle, about his new work, Reimagining the Religious Landscape, Chaos Before a New Ordering. We explored the background of the piece and then dug into the map he offers of sacred and non-sacred space, where congregations fit into today's culture, and why ideas like desire paths and unbundling matter for understanding what's happening in the church today. If you haven't listened to that first episode, it's a good one, and as you can tell, packed with fabulous information and insight. So I encourage you to go back and listen. It will give you the foundation for today's continuation of the conversation. Also, if you haven't downloaded Gil's monograph, the link is in the show notes, or visit our Wesleyan Impact Partners website. We're picking up right where we left off, with Gil helping us think about what churches can learn from movements that seem to know how to meet deep human needs. So, Gil, let's dive in. You point out that movements, whether we're talking about 12-step groups or Black Lives Matter or even a Taylor Swift tour, function in ways that meet deep human needs. What can churches learn from these movements?
Well, first of all, hi, Lisa.
Hi, Gil.
And I'm glad to be back and to pick up on the conversation. And thanks for the question. I think that we might need to take a couple of steps in there before we get to the point of saying what do congregations need to be thinking about here. But we're really looking at something that is showing up on the new landscape because it is a different kind of corporate human behavior that we've not seen before, which obviously is kind of designed off of what's happening to us as technological people and diverse people and everything else we know about our culture that's going on. And the first thing that I want to pick up from our last conversation is a whole issue of meaning making. That instead of thinking about people always wanting to be on a particularly religious kind of search in their lives, and instead of saying that they want to align with a religious institution, there is within us and always has been within us this search for meaning, making sense of the world and how we fit into the world. And who else is trying to figure it out with us and those things. We talked about that last time. Well, that's really the introduction to the movement for me, that people can easily find movements today and attach themselves to movements today because of our technological connectedness. It's easy to find movements that you've heard about and to sort them out. And what would happen is that as people, just follow what is happening culturally and the movements that are forming, they can simply ask themselves, does that reflect the way I think about myself or does it not? And if it does reflect the way that I think about myself, then I can go deeper into it. And as I go deeper into it, it helps me to understand my world, or it helps me to understand the world I would like to live in if it isn't the one I'm currently living in, because a lot of these are social justice movement that we're talking about. And so it's a way in which people are trying to kind of walk into and answer those questions of meaning in their own lives. Is this me? Are these people, people I want to associate with? And so there's that part of it. And then the second part I would also want to bring forward from our last conversation is that whole notion of embeddedness. If you are going to step into an ongoing institution, it will require some behaviors from you. You will be expected to attend. You will be expected to show up. You will be expected to volunteer. You will be expected to offer funding, all of those things. And that's known as being embedded in the organization. One of the real differences here is that if you are attaching yourself to a movement, you are highly disembedded.
Okay, so a lower bar for entry and for exit,
Exactly.
so that
Exactly.
they might be more willing, if you will, or more inclined to engage because there's just low risk, if you
Low
will.
risk. And if it continues to be of really great meaning, you can keep walking farther and
Mhm.
farther into it and get much more involved with it. Or you can stay as close to the surface as you want. You can even lurk and not even let other people know that you're present. But at the same time, you are working with your own identity. Who am I
Mm.
in this world that I understand, and what do I hope? And so, these movements are providing something that traditional religious faith provided very clearly for people in
Mhm.
ways. And so, with this notion that I can help to define myself, it's almost like a do-it-yourself project.
Okay.
Okay, and you're free to be and not to be in that.
Mhm.
And so, one of the things I think that we can say pretty clearly on is that many people find that both the traditional practices of congregations and the expectations of participation in a congregation far outweigh what people are willing to give up front. That
Okay.
doesn't mean that they're not that they don't also frame the world in the same way that congregation might. And they might find, the figure of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus and the Christology of the church to be really meaningful for them. But they're organizationally, they simply don't want to step into that. It's not the world they live in. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense, and th I'm really intrigued by the notion of what it means to have a low bar for entry and exit, and as you said, they're doing some identity work and some meaning work, but formation is this thread throughout. And so, in other words, how are we being formed as humans? How are we being formed as spiritual beings? How are we being formed to engage in community and in the world and making the world a better place? And and I mean, really, some of these movements, anyway, are also doing that. I mean,
Uh huh.
but I would
Okay.
say, I don't. To varying degrees, I
To
might
varying
say.
degrees.
You noted that some of these are justice movements, and
Yeah.
so, um, are the folks who engage with some of these movements actually being formed in their I don't wanna say in their faith. You can see how my lens is still the church lens. It's still the
Sure.
congregational lens, right? And
Yeah.
so, and yet people are thinking about their identity, they're thinking about meaning and purpose. Um, I mean, is there a point at which they need more?
Well, I think the answer is I don't know.
Okay, fair.
But it is the right question, and I think that as we go on in our conversations with some other people, we'll be asking that question somewhat, with some
Right.
regularity.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Because the easy in, easy out is not really a relationship. It's not really a transactional
Mhm,
relationship. It's a connection,
mhm,
and people can decide what they're going to do with that. But it might also not be of enough permanence to actually help people shape their values and their
mhm,
behaviors.
mhm.
One of my favorite anecdotes comes from Houston Smith, who was noted as a kind of a master of world religions. He did more to try to help people understand cross religions, kind of across our various world faith religions. And he had written, I think, something like 12 or 13 books on the subject. And so he was being interviewed on NPR at one time, and the interviewer, after they had walked through a number of different traditions, said to him, "Now, Dr. Smith, how about your own spiritual practice? You know so much about all of these different faith traditions. Do you pick and choose the things that you like? And so that's what you practice for yourself." And he almost got upset, and he just very, definitively said no. He said, I have mastered and kind of disciplined myself in every one of those religions. The only way that I'm allowed, or I would allow myself to practice that, is because of the depth that I have, kind of gained in each one. Every tradition is meant to form us
Mm.
and to shape us. And if you don't discipline yourself in it, you're not shaped.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, it's that whole sense that if you don't go deep into something, it really isn't changing you.
So
Go ahead.
it strikes me that whether it's a free form organization or a volunteer association kind of organization, that the more embedded you are, and I think this is what Houston Smith is saying, the deeper you go into that engagement, the more you are formed. Because when you become embedded, you take on disciplines, sometimes sacrifices, sometimes practices and rituals, however you want to talk about it,
Right.
to be deeper in that organization. And so then with commitment, with sacrifice, with discipline, we get formed and shaped.
Right.
So,
Now,
okay.
in all of the social movements that we would know,
Mhm,
and particularly as you move on, you begin to talk about the 12-step programs and others, you find people that are walking very, very deeply in that. They are
mhm,
choosing to embed themselves in that.
mhm,
And that really is, shaping them quite a bit. But then this is the question that I think that it will be really fun to raise with the other people that we're going to talk with, because a number of them are in these kinds of internet connections and communities where they're trying to get people to connect and to move with them. But who is that changing? And I don't know, and I'm not sure that they'll be able to tell us either, because I've already talked with some who said, yeah, it's a question that they wrestle with.
right, right. That we're probably all still learning and paying attention
Right,
to.
right,
And
right.
so back to the question of what can churches learn from these more free form movements? I mean, if anything, I mean, what's the
Oh yeah,
interplay here,
sure.
right?
Well, no, the interplay for me is our churches and the leaders of our churches and the denominational executives of our churches have to understand that the structure and the practices of the congregation, the organizational practices, are there to support the development of faith. Okay,
Mhm,
the practices and the structure is not the purpose of the church. And this notion that you have to get people to do it one way, or they have to all agree on something, or or that there are some basic limits or boundaries that they have to step over.
mhm,
No, it's a much more free form world than that right now.
mm,
And so, are congregations able to have relationships with neighbors in ways that they are not asking the neighbor to conform to the institutional expectation, but can still honor the relationship?
mm,
And even more than that, congregations really need to be able to express much more clearly who they are and what truth they hold and what truth they're trying to live out,
mm,
so that other people know whether they want to step toward them or not.
mhm.
I get into this a little bit in the monograph, and I think it's one of the biggest issues that we're going to have to face because of Christian nationalism, that there are so many definitions of Christianity out there, that one of the things that congregations are going to have to learn is how to have a vocabulary of their own Christianity, so that they can describe
Yeah,
themselves, so that the person that they're talking to knows whether they want to step toward or step away from them.
yeah. We come back to how important identity is.
Yeah,
Clarity of
exactly.
identity, clarity of purpose or
Right,
calling.
right,
Right, right.
right. And that was never the issue, in the earlier church, because we just
That's
had
it.
this kind of national identity of the mainline church, at
Mhm.
least the part that I came from. So anyway, that's an old
Yeah,
story, but go ahead.
yeah. Well, just to say, you talk about in the monograph some examples of entrepreneurial leaders. You talk about these small refugia
Right.
as hopeful signs. So will you say a
Right.
word about what you mean by refugia and and really what is inspiring you about these expressions of faith?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking about the entrepreneurial leaders, the religious social entrepreneurs
Mhm.
and Refugia, they are both very much in the same kind of a category for me. These are people who are really doing the do-it-yourself kind of thing. They're not, hanging their wagon on some institutional star to try to move them. They're going their own direction because they don't want to be constrained,
Mhm.
or that they have to protect themselves. And so, the social entrepreneurs are stepping out to name an issue and then to build a community and an organization around that issue where they can all move together, and that really is do it yourself. Refugia is a little bit different, and Refugia comes from, kind of an ecological framework again. That Refugia are these tiny little safe places.
Mm.
The image that I
In the
use
ecosystems.
in the
Right.
ecosystem,
Okay.
exactly right. This is really really down to earth, if you will. And
Quite
so, um, when Mount St. Helena went had the great eruption and lost half of the face of a mountain, people were saying it was going to take lifetimes to get any kind of life back on that mountain for it to regrow and to repopulate itself. And they were surprised that within 40 short years, there was a tremendous amount of growth already there on that landscape that had been destroyed. And what the ecologists discovered is that that quick growth came from the seeds or the tiny little animals. They were able to sneak into these little tiny safe spaces that did
Mhm.
not get, kind of devastated by the volcano and the landslide and everything. Little pockets where they could secure themselves until it was safe to come out.
Mm.
Well, ours is as a polarized culture as any of us can remember. And so this notion of safety is really one that people are paying an awful lot of attention to. Is it safe to talk to people? Is it safe to be who I am? Can I say what I really think? And so what's happening with Refugia is that there are these tiny little pockets of people who are finding each other to be safe so that they can have open, honest conversations about what their hopes are and what they're willing to do and to encourage each other and support each other. And again, it's a do-it-yourself project. The first time I was aware of Refugia was back in the 1970s and the early to mid 1970s when there was a reaction in the Catholic Church to the liturgy, because a lot of people were saying the liturgy doesn't express, who we are, what we want. They wanted something less formal. They wanted something that was much more cultural. And they began to develop house churches. And people would write their own songs, their own liturgies, and go into each other's homes, and they would have that place to do that. There's a lot of that stuff going on right
Yeah.
now. And as I say in the monograph, I can name, 4 or 5 that I'm even involved with. And I think people will see it wherever they look. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So maybe I'll change my question a little bit and say um, ask you to give an example or two here
Sure.
and why that matters for this conversation about what's happening in the church. Yeah. So
Sure.
connect those dots for us a little bit.
Okay. Well, one that I came across recently, my son lives in a neighborhood where everybody walks. And so when I go over there, I usually go over there to meet people for coffee, or there's a bookstore over there that I use quite a bit, and I get my hair cut there. And so I park my car on the edge of the community and I walk.
Oh.
Well, not too long ago, I came across a sign on somebody's lawn. And the name of the community is Narberth. And so the sign said, Narberth Havara. Now, a Havara is one of these small,
House
tiny
church.
little Jewish groups
Yeah.
where people read text together, they study text together, they talk about what's important to them, they work on it together. And there are these lawn signs. I saw 3 of them in my walk where
Mhm.
people just had their sign out there saying, we are now developing a new Narberth Havurah. Here's the telephone number. And the tagline is an inclusive Jewish community.
Hmm.
So the point is, if you're Jewish and you want to be part of an inclusive community, you don't have to go to a synagogue. Here's a group of people who are already have their fingers in that.
Mhm.
And they're open and willing if you're going to come in and be part of that. That's a clear refugia that, people have found this safe space to work on something together that means something for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. A safe space. And I'm also hearing there's this thread of, you've said it a couple times, like do it yourself, sort of
Right.
DIY spirituality, if you will, or even
Right.
building even religious community. I mean, that's clearly grounded in organized religion. It's just this
Right.
is a form of it that lives outside maybe of the local Jewish temple or that kind of thing. So are these, or in what ways are these religious social entrepreneurs connected to these safe refugia, or are they? Yeah.
Well, I think the religious social entrepreneurs are working at this at a larger scale. It has some of the same dynamics to me.
Hmm.
It's clearly identifying what the issue is and what difference they would like to see in the world, and are you willing to work with us on that? And so, that is very much the nature. And so, I find a lot of a connection between both the entrepreneurial adventures and the refugia. Um, Let me say quickly that any kind of a do-it-yourself project has the freedom to allow you to dig in deeply to that which means the most to you.
Hmm.
But it also has the potential for going theologically awry
Yeah.
because there's no guardrails on these.
Right. Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this really ties into my next question because I most of the folks that listen are connected to congregations, or they're working with within denominations, and
Right.
so and I think a lot of what we see and a lot of the research pushes against the value of denominations or the inherited models, and I guess I'm wanting you to talk about what's the value there, and what's needed, what kind of leadership is needed in this new landscape as we look at
Sure.
the broader landscape. Yeah.
Sure. Um, let's see if we can go at it from this point of view. Most of my adult life, um, the connection that I felt with the denomination seemed to be framed around polity,
Hmm.
how we do things.
Yeah.
And so the issue of how we do things has grown less and less significant
Mm,
over time.
okay.
But the issue of who we are
Mm.
and why we do things is increasingly important.
And perhaps even more important than ever.
Yeah, well, at least in our lifetime.
Right. In our lifetime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, one of the things that I would say then is that those people who are connected to ongoing institutions of any kind of religious tradition, their importance is not following the rules of polity, but learning how to live within the bounds of their theology.
Mm,
You see, if there are no guardrails, people will take their beliefs in so many different ways, some of which actually stand very much against, what text says and what tradition has offered us. But a denomination, one of the primary things that a denomination does is it provides a certain guardrail, this boundary that you should not go beyond.
mm, mhm.
And theologically, that's something I think we have to learn how to observe even more so. And it's not about differences. I mean, one of the things that is really good about the entrepreneurial leadership and the Refugia is that it is accepting the differences among people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no longer in the way. It was the old Wesleyan quote is, if your heart is as my heart, if you love God and mankind, I ask nothing more. Just give me your hand.
Mm-hmm.
If we've got that much together, we can move ahead. Okay. But without the theological, kind of guardrails, I guess is the way I'm saying it today, that come from the long history of our traditions,
Mm-hmm.
we can really run amok with that stuff. And it's happening all over the place with our Christian nationalism and with, the New Apostolic Reformation and the other things that are happening to us that are far and away within my understanding of my own faith and tradition, well outside the boundaries. Easy to get there.
Yeah, easy to get there, and here we find ourselves. And so I'm hearing you say, in terms of what's needed for leadership today, it is this theological work. It's the why more than the how, and it's
Right.
the identity work, and it's the formation work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now, the challenge is, how do you do that with an institution that is already there that you're responsible for? And
Uh-huh.
it's become quite a burden for people who are part of established congregations and denominations.
Yeah. Uh,
It's not easy.
Right. It's not easy. And you touched on this a little bit in the first one, but I want to kind of circle back to the big picture of, like, why does mapping this meaning making landscape matter? Like, what would be the purpose of mapping out the meaning making landscape, and how is it helpful for the church
Yeah. Yeah.
today? Yeah.
Um, I would say that the primary purpose of trying to develop this kind of a map is because it can enable conversation and inquiry.
Hmm.
More than anything else. I mean, I already said that, the map that I've been working on is the product of conversations. And there have been a series of maps that we have used over the history of religion in the United States to describe them. The map is simply a descriptive tool. This is what I see. And so the question is, if I draw the picture of what I see and you read that picture and you say, oh, I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have something to talk about. And you can raise issues with me and say, Gil, well, what about formation? Well, we wouldn't have had that conversation if it hadn't been for a map where we were pointing to people who were doing this kind of,
Uh-huh.
kind of community building without the formation that we know. So we're able to say, are they doing formation? Okay. So do you hear what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
A map is simply a description. It is this interpretive framework is the way that that Wind and Lewis talk about these maps. Here's our interpretation right now. What does that help us see, and what do we want to talk about? What will we work with?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, this map is simply preparing for the next map maker. Did I mention my friend and my neighbor collects historic maps from the 1500s?
Oh no, you didn't.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
he's no, but don't think about this. He's Canadian.
Okay.
And with his Canadian background, he has this quest to purchase maps of Canada that would be the lower, the southeast portion of Canada and the northeast portion of the United States. And so he has some maps that go back into the 1500s.
Wow.
Okay, so back then they didn't have a whole lot of information, and so you can see where the Great Lakes are, but they're the size of a sea. I mean, they overwhelm the map because that's what the map makers could see at that
Right.
time.
They didn't
They
have
came
the
back and
edges.
they didn't have, okay.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is people use those maps to take their trip, and they come back and they make a better map because they saw more.
Mm.
They used this and they found more, and okay, that's where we are. That's why a map is helpful. We need a way to talk about an experience that is confusing us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a way of trying to explain everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's not much more than, this is what I see. Do you see it?
Yeah. And then what
And now
questions
let's
does
work
that
it.
raise?
Right,
And
right,
yeah.
right.
Okay. You use this word confusing us, like we're
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
make
Yeah.
sense. And
Yeah.
and in the title of your monograph, you say moving from chaos to cosmos. So talk a little bit about, well, let me say it this way, maybe. It does feel a little chaotic and it does feel confusing. So what is giving you hope right now for the future of faith communities?
Well, the quick answer to the question is, what gives me hope is that I have a deep and firm belief that this is going someplace.
Mm,
Chaos is not leading to some kind of disassembling our lives or our culture or our faith. It actually is leading someplace, but none of us can say where it's going. And this is actually a part that I'm hoping to write about within the next, let's say, year or so.
mm,
Um, that I've been well aware, again, going back into the 70s, I've been a part of a conversation and this was actually part of my PhD work, where the lessons and the learnings of the new sciences, the new physics,
mm.
what we would call quantum physics,
Olympus.
was beginning to blend with Zen Buddhism and some of the
Mm,
truths of Zen Buddhism. And that people were beginning to look at that. Now, the reason for that, if you want just a quick reason, which is hardly sufficient, is that quantum physics got us into nonlinear thinking and nonlinear mathematics. So you could no longer figure things out so that you could both understand and control it. And one of the things that was happening with the new physics is that they were experiencing times, particularly at the subatomic level, where things were happening that they could not predict and they certainly could not control.
mm-hmm.
And back in the 70s, there was Ilya Prigogine, who was a Nobel Prize physicist, who came up with this theory of dissipative systems. Okay, this is all the fun that we get to talk about these kinds of things. But what it really comes down to, what is a threshold of change? A
Mm.
threshold of change is the limit of that element's comfort. It can no longer comfortably be what it is. Because
Okay, now
that
you're
which is
meddling, but keep
Yes,
going.
absolutely. Okay. And so what he was showing in terms of the physics is that if you were to hold an element in that at the threshold of change for a long enough period, the discomfort would overwhelm the system and it would reorient itself
Mm,
at a higher level, or it would simply fall apart. But if it oriented itself at a higher level, you could never project what was going to happen,
mhm,
nor could you control it.
mhm.
You just had to be an observer. And so when you begin to talk about that, okay, and so that is very much, walking very close to a number of Zen principles.
Mm,
But it's also at that point of saying that we who are part of a faith community understand mystery as well.
yeah.
That there are some things that we can hold firmly to, knowing that we cannot predict,
Mhm.
okay? We
For
cannot
control.
control.
Mhm.
And I think that this plays itself out in so many different ways. It's
Mhm.
even the way that we tell the narrative. I think this is the part that I really want to try to write about, that, the way that a mathematician describes that territory of chaos uh, and using the language of mathematics is the same way we talk about our lives of faith using the narratives of the stories that we have.
Mm, mm.
You know, Jesus's birth was already uncomfortable for the reigning kings in the area.
Yes.
And as the story goes on, the tension just builds and builds and builds, and Jesus gets asked all these trick questions because until they can't sustain it anymore, and he is betrayed, moved on to a crucifixion where everything falls apart.
Or does it?
to come back at a higher level
Yes.
3 days later. Okay. So, that narrative is there in the Christian story. That narrative is there in the Jewish story, particularly of the Exodus,
Mm-hmm.
and how long it took for people in slavery to finally come to the point where, Moses is the leader who says too much is too much. And now and the whole thing falls apart. They go into the wilderness only to be, okay. We have to pay attention to some of these trajectories.
Mm.
Because it is the way we live in the world. It is who we are.
Mm.
And I don't know how many people are, just permanently afraid at the moment because they think that politically we are falling apart and religiously we don't have enough people following the traditions. And everything has gone to hell in a handbasket. And the answer is yes.
Mm.
It absolutely has, with purpose.
With purpose. We're pointed somewhere.
But if it's with purpose, then those who want to align with that purpose have to claim it.
Mm.
And that's what I think we're watching on the landscape here. People who are claiming their hope by finding each other
Mm-hmm.
in this search for meaning.
Mm.
It's happening all over the place. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's so good, Gil. You're so good. Yeah.
Well, we took a couple of side trips there.
No, it's great. It's great. All right. Well, I have one final question that we're asking all of our guests this season. So that's where we
Right.
are now. We're
That's
to the
where we
final
are.
question.
Okay.
So, what's one practice or perhaps perspective that helps you stay grounded and open to God's new thing in this season?
Well, the one that I would point to is the one that I share with my wife, and that is that we are very careful how we read political news today.
Mm.
And if you will, with whatever newspaper we might be involved with, we read the headings so that we're aware of what's going on, but we try not to track the turbulence.
Mm.
And we try not to get sucked into all of the, sub-stories and everything with it. But instead, we stay connected in relationship with one another and with our friends and with our community. We want to know, what's going on. We don't want to be overwhelmed by it. We're going to keep faith and we're going to keep practicing who we are. Mm. And we often have that conversation with each other and with our friends about what have you done to make things a little bit better in this world that is changing. And, where are you putting your stake, and what next steps have you taken? And, we listen to the news and then we talk about, okay, how are we going to move ahead? And so it's kind of a deliberate practice for us at this point.
I appreciate that. And several times as you described that, you talked about your friends, your community, and so I just over the years getting to be in conversation with you and with Lynn, and knowing how you have very intentionally invested in creating community after years and years on the road.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How intentionally you have invested in your community, you and Lynn, and that's beautiful. So this, it's not a head in the sand. It's very much, I'm hearing you say, we're not going to go deep dive, make ourselves untethered or whatever with the news, but rather keep up, but really invest in those that are around you. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Gil. Thank you for your wisdom, your experience, your generosity of spirit, all of it. Thank you for being with us.
You bet. Thanks for talking me through this.
Yeah, well, and I'm so looking forward to the season. We're going to have a lot of fun with some amazing guests. And so I'm looking forward.
And I hope when people read the monograph that they can also say, I see it. That's really what I'm after.
Yeah. May it be so.
Good. May it be so. Thank you.